Let me tell you what's about to shake the church more than any scandal, more than any culture war. It is going to be mergers and acquisitions. They are coming to the church. We've been talking about it for a few weeks, and tonight we're getting ready to dive into it. So I want you to do me a favor at the very onset. I want you to do a couple of things. Number one, I want you to like this video, and I want you to click share, especially if you're on YouTube. Make sure you click the subscribe button. I've noticed that most of the people who watch our videos are not subscribed. So take a moment, subscribe to this video. Then here's what I want you to do. I want you to send this link to 5 other leaders that you know need this. You know they need to hear this. You know they need to get prepared for it. Regardless of what side of the mergers and acquisitions you're going to be on, if you're here tonight and you are a pastor who is really facing some tough challenges you don't see a way out of, you're not sure how to get through it, then in this conversation, I'll help you discover if you being on the side of a merger is right for you, finding another church that you can partner with. And maybe if you are leading a church that has a little bit of momentum, I'm also going to give you some insight on how you can begin the process of identifying churches that might be a good fit. So here's what I need you to do first. I need everybody to click share, send it to some people, and jump in the comments. Let me know who you are, where you're watching from, and I want to shout you out. I want to respond to you, and I want to know who you are. All right. Here is the bleak reality. Most churches are not prepared for the future that is coming. You know, think about how off guard so many people were when we were forced into this technological revolution during the pandemic. While it's something that we should have done a long time ago, for those who had not made the shift, they were forced into it. And they had to come up against the reality that they were being pushed into a direction that they were not quite prepared to go. And they had to get prepared. But the shift that's coming, the shifts that are coming now are a little bit different. Last week, 2 weeks ago, we talked about 7 shifts that are coming to the Black church. And last week, we talked about shift number 1. And if you haven't seen that video, I encourage you, go back and watch it. Go back and take a look, because I promise you it will bless your life. But one of the things that we don't want to talk about is we don't want to talk about the fact that churches are getting bought, sold, and merged. It is a real thing that is happening, and we cannot pretend it's not happening, because if we pretend it's not happening, that's when and where we get blindsided. And I do not want to see us be blindsided. I got introduced to this in a very unique way. The first church I ever pastored, when we closed that church, there were several people who approached me and said, "Man, would you just sell it to me?" Right? And it was a foreign country. I'm like, what are you talking about? How do you sell a church as people? I can't sell it. And I didn't. And, eventually I sold the stuff, and I sold the chairs and all the equipment and so forth and so on. As it would happen, right when we were closing our church, there was a church who had caught fire. And they lost everything, and they needed everything. And guess what? We had everything. And so we were able to transfer those assets to them, pay off our remaining debts, and make sure that we did things the right way. But I was not aware that there were people who wanted to buy the church. They wanted to keep the name, and they wanted to keep the people, and they wanted to keep the culture, and they wanted to keep the staff, and they wanted to do all these different things. And ultimately, I just did not find the right fit. And rather than to give our people to somebody who I did not know or trust or think could care for them, we decided to close the doors. But it is a very real thing that is happening. And I want to share that. And the reason I wanted to share that is because I don't want you to believe that I'm sharing what I'm sharing from some ivory tower, that I'm sitting in a position where I've always gotten things right and always done things well. The first church I ever pastored, it grew like wildfire. And to be honest with you, when we closed it, it was still strong. But we closed it because I felt a very strong sense that it was time for me to move into the next chapter of what God was calling me to do. I did not want to leave. It was something that my pastor had to walk me through, and he had to coach me through it. And eventually he told me, he said, if it's your church, you will never leave. But if it's God's church, you'll leave when he tells you to. And as I got ready to walk away, We did not have someone in house at the time who felt prepared to carry it, right? And so we ended up just closing the doors. And so from that place, I'm sharing this hard truth with a sprinkle of grace and mercy to say, look, I understand what it means to be in a situation that you never prepared to be in. All right. So let's talk about a couple of things. Number one, why is this conversation so important? Why do we need to be talking about church mergers and acquisitions? Well, there's a couple of reasons. Number one, let's talk about the harsh reality. Churches are getting smaller. Whether we like it or not, churches are getting smaller. And so where we had become accustomed, especially here in the South, to churches that were 100, 150, 200 people, what we're discovering is that many churches, many of our average churches are below 50 people. And that's a very real stat. There was a time where the average church in America was 90 people, and that number has come down since the pandemic. And I would argue that it's even smaller in the Black church. And so churches are getting smaller, and as a result, buildings are empty. And so now we've got a whole lot of building with very few people. And here's the reality. Here's the hard thing is that note, the mortgage on that building doesn't go down because your membership goes down. It doesn't go down because attendance decreases. It stays the same. And so it's forcing us to be more strategic about what we're doing. The buildings that we gave our lives to build and to put together are no longer serving us in the same ways. And so here we are in this massive building, meeting in the fellowship hall because the sanctuary is too big, right? And we've got all these kind of problems happening. Number three, pastors are aging with no successor. Pastors are aging and they don't have successors who are prepared to come behind them and to step into the vacancies that they're leaving behind. And so as a result, we're facing some really challenging times and some difficult moments. And so we've got to talk about this. All right. If you haven't already, go ahead and click like and subscribe and make sure you share this with 5 pastors that you know who should come in. Here's another issue. This is a very real thing. Can we talk about it? Man, we just got money problems. If we can just be honest, we got money problems in the church. There are some serious money problems in the church. Why? Because a couple of things. Fixed costs are rising, right? Now your variable cost, right? Those costs that change here and there, you can kind of flow with those, right? Your variable costs could be how much you spending on ads, or it could be all of these little things that could go up and down. Do we need this? Do we not need this? Do I need that? Do I not? Those are variable costs. But when fixed costs start changing, you feel it differently. You feel it differently when your utility bill starts to be double what it normally was, right? When your church is large enough, you pay that utility bill because you need air when it's hot, you need heat when it's cold. But when those fixed costs start rising at a rapid rate, now it becomes something completely different. And we've got to deal with it. That's a real thing. Is that now these costs are going up. Not only that, but our giving bases are smaller, meaning that we don't have as many giving units as we used to have. And not only that, but prices and cost and inflation is hitting everybody. And so even if people are still tithing, are they giving offerings at the same level? In some cases, they are not. And what we have is now we've found ourselves with these facilities that we cannot hold on to, and we've got to figure it out. But here's another set of barriers that I think are very important. And these might honestly be the most important because you can convince yourself to ignore everything else I just said. But here are the things that you cannot ignore. The emotional barriers to what's happening in and around the church. As your church goes through transition, whether it's transitioning for better or transitioning for worse, there's a couple of things you've got to contend with. Number one is pride. We've got to talk about mergers and acquisitions because one of the things that might be blocking you from a move of God is your own ego. Your ego is too prideful to feel like you're taking a step back. And by the end of this conversation, I'm going to convince you that going through a merger or an acquisition is not a loss, it's actually a win. It is an opportunity to be a part of something special. And one of the things that you've got to deal with and that we've got to wrestle with is we've got to wrestle with our pride. And we have a little bit of pride. I understand that. Like it's hard to do what we do or to be successful at anything without walking sometimes close to that line between confidence and pride. And we've got to deal with that. What will people say? What will people think? All the people who celebrated us when we took this post and we accepted this role and we said yes to the pastorate. Like, what do we say to those people when they ask why we're closing the doors? Is merging an admission that I couldn't get it done? Is it an admission that my ability were not what others thought? Right? What does it mean? We're going to talk about that. Number 2 is legacy. Legacy is another barrier. Sometimes we hold on to things because of what we think they mean to us and what they might mean to other people. And sometimes we're holding on to things because we want to leave a legacy and we're afraid that walking away or going through a merger erases that legacy and that history. And we'll talk about that some more. And then lastly is name and identity. When our church is more connected to the name on the front of the building than the name that is above all names, then we will see it as a slight and a hit to our identity to go by another name. And we've got to deal with that because this isn't just about money. It's not just about those things. It's about who we are as a church. And we've got to come to grips with some things so that we can move fully into what God has called us to do. All right. So let's get some working definitions. Let's get clear on what we're talking about when we talk about mergers and acquisition. All right. And acquisitions, a couple of things. Let's talk about mergers. When we talk about mergers, we're talking about two churches that voluntarily unite under one leadership, one vision, sometimes keeping both locations as the campuses. Right now, there are different kinds of mergers, but it's two churches voluntarily coming together. They're not forced together. They're deciding, let's come together. Right. And I'm not talking about the secret underhanded mergers that I'm seeing start to increase in the Black church. Is that I'm seeing in the Black church more pastor to pastor mergers that don't include the people. And in my experience, those are much more difficult to navigate. Those secret mergers where, pastors get together or one pastor who's just tired and done and wants to just buy out. He starts by saying, hey, I'm going on a sabbatical. Such and such is going to be preaching for me, since, whatever it is, or the churches start using the same building. And then all of a sudden he just decides, hey, look, I'm not coming back. Such and such has been preaching. He's going to be y'all pastor, right? That's what I call the secret merge. Those do not work as well. Those are much more difficult, in my opinion, because people feel kind of tricked into it, right? The mergers I'm talking about is when the pastors, the leaders, and the congregations are all aware that these two families are coming together as one, right? Imagine having a blended family, that husband and that wife and those kids. Before the marriage takes place, they need to spend some time together because they're going to be living in the same house. They're going to be eating at the same table. They got to be sharing the same bathrooms. All those things have to happen. And you cannot make an intimate transition in an isolated way. Right? You cannot make an intimate transition in an isolated way. Somebody put that in the chat. You cannot make an intimate transition in an isolated way. And so when we talk about mergers, we're talking about two bodies that agree to come together. Now, when we talk about acquisitions, we're talking about a stronger church that absorbs the struggling church, keeping the building but changing leadership. Let's have an honest conversation. Let's have an honest conversation. And you ought to know me by now well enough to know what I'm about to say. I'm saying in love, but I'm giving you this warning. I'm about to say something hard. When you want to change an organization, the easiest and most effective way to change it is by changing the leadership. I'm going to say it again. When you want to change an organization, the easiest and often most effective way is to change leadership. Now, there are exceptions to the rule. But typically, if you go and you buy a company that's struggling and you want to move it to profitability, you're not going to keep the leader who led it to struggling in the first place. You're going to change the leadership, right? And so when acquisitions come, one of the things that's happening is the leader or the church who's being acquired is agreeing to submit to the vision of the stronger church that is coming in to pull them in. Now, I will say this, there are some acquisitions that can feel like mergers because the honor coming from the acquiring church and the acquiring pastor and the respect for them is so high. And if the pastor coming in who is being merged in, who's been acquired, has a specific skill set that fills a need at the new church, like if the pastor is great at pastoral care in a small church, but not necessarily a visionary leader, well, when they get acquired, they can come in and do pastoral care and really, really thrive. And sometimes it can feel like a merger, right? And so here's the reality. This is coming to the church. For many years, we have seen mergers and acquisitions as a white church thing and maybe not a black church thing. But I need you to hear me. It is coming and it is here. It is happening right now. It's happening every day. You don't see it a lot because we don't publicize it and we don't talk about it. We just kind of do it underground and it just happens that way. But it is something serious that is coming to our churches and we've got to get ready for it. All right. So let's dive into it. If we're going to make the shift, we've got to make a shift from our current way of thinking to a new way of thinking, right? So we've got to move from our current thinking or our current mindset to a shifted mindset. So let's talk about these two different types of thinking around mergers and acquisitions. And one of them leads to death. One of them leads to life. So let's talk about the old way of thinking first that leads towards the death of a church. All right. A couple of things. Number one, you hear statements like, this is our church. We will die before we give it up. And you know what happens when congregations say things like that? They die. They die. Because that's the old way of thinking. The old way of thinking is I would rather struggle by myself than accept help from anybody else. That's an old way of thinking that we have got to root out of the body of Christ. Church and ministry was always meant to be a team sport done by a collective. It was not meant to be individualized. We were never called to care more about our local church than we care about the global church. And so we've got to learn to do what's best for the big C church and not just the small C church. Come on, somebody put that in the comments. Put shift in the comments. We got to shift our mindsets. This is not your church. It's his church. It's his church. And if it's his church, you will do what he leads you to do. And this old way of thinking is so dangerous because it blocks you from even asking God what he wants to do. You can't even explore it. You won't even ask God what he wants to do because you've already made up in your mind which direction you want to go. And so we've got to shift. Another part of this old way of thinking is when your identity is tied to a building or to the legacy of a leader who is now gone. Listen to me. If your identity as a church only exists because of the building that you're in, what are you really doing? What are you really building? What have you really established? Like, what are we really, really doing? What are we really, really building? And you've got to understand it's an old way of thinking is that your legacy is tied to a facility. It's not. Your legacy should be tied to faithfulness to the mission and the vision that God has called you to. Right? Here's another one. Fear of losing our history. Fear of losing our history. Here's the reality is that the history can go with you. The history is a marker for what God has done in the past and hopefully a precursor to what he wants to do in the future. The old way of thinking is valuing history over possibility, of valuing the past above the future. What happens to that history if the church closes down and dies and the building sits dilapidated and nobody wants to buy the building because it needs so many repairs. And you're upside down on the notes because you done refinanced it so many times. And now nobody can come in and buy it. It sits there and it becomes nothing until the roofs start falling in, and it just becomes an eyesore in the community. What happens to the history then? At least with the coming shift, you have an opportunity, you have a responsibility to at least consider, how could God continue the work? And then the final thing is suspicion and distrust is another old way of thinking. Is we see ourselves as in competition with other ministries, and we are competing with who God has called us to collaborate with. And we've got to make that shift. We've got to make that shift. We cannot compete with who God has called us to collaborate with. And so now, how do we make the shift? How do we make the shift? We've got to shift to a new way of thinking. Because here's the reality. Many of you are holding on to a building like it's the ark. And the fact of the matter is, if God has moved on, you should move on too, or else you're just preserving a museum and not a movement. Oh my goodness. Is your church a movement or a museum? Museums are places where we go to remember what was. It's where we go to remember what was, not celebrate what is. Come on, which is it? Here's a new way of thinking. The new way of thinking says, I hold the kingdom over our brand, over our original, our name or our culture or who our pastor is or who founded us. It's about kingdom first. Listen, you cannot hold on to your church like it is the ark. Can somebody tell me what Noah's ark is? Somebody tell me what happened to it after the rain stopped. They came out of that ark and we don't know nothing else about it. Why? Because it did its job. The ark was just a vehicle. It was just a vehicle. It's one of many vehicles that God used. It's one of many vehicles. It's one of many tools he used to bring deliverance to his people. He used the ark in one season. He used the tabernacle in another season. He went from the tent of meeting in another season. He used all these different things in different seasons. And so what you got to understand is you got to move with God. Here's another thing, is that you got to understand that your legacy isn't about buildings, it's about people. It's about people. This is how your thinking has got to shift. I'm about to give you some practical steps to do this, but you've got to get your mind right first. Listen to me. I've learned this over and over again. I can give you the practical how-to steps and all those things in the world. But if you don't shift your mindset, it won't last and it won't work. You know, here's another thing. You could be sharing resources and understanding that sharing resources is a smart way to do stewardship. Here you go with resources and no people. And you got another church all across town that got people and no resources. And so you got all these resources and nobody to give it to. They got all these people and nothing to give them. If y'all two came together, everything would change. Listen, smaller churches could survive and thrive if they had a bigger covering. A bigger covering. You know, it's understanding that when you go through a merger or an acquisition, you're not ceasing to do ministry. You're just changing how you do it. Like, think about it. Think about shifting from a season where you don't even have enough budget to get a musician to now going on to a staff where not only do they already have all that stuff in place, but now they've got space to bring you and maybe one other person onto the team to help lead. Like, things could be really, really different, but you've got to have the right mindset. All right, let's keep going. Let's keep going, because I want to, you know, I feel like I've been hitting y'all hard the last couple of weeks, and we've been going long, and I wanted this one tonight to be really concise and really straight to the point. So let's talk about this. All right, here are some of the reasons that we're going to see this, and I want to sit on this for a minute because this is important. And then after this, I'm going to show you some of the benefits of a merger, and I'm going to give you some steps to take. All right, here's one of the reasons that we're going to see an increase. All right, number one, the economics are going to make sense. The economics just make sense. With all of the rising cost, it just makes sense for congregations to come together. Because even if you pull together two churches of 50 people, Instead of both of them struggling to pay the mortgage, the utilities, get any kind of staff, any kind of music ministry, children's ministry, instead of both of them struggling, if they come together in one building, those two churches of 50 coming together becomes a church of 100. And a church of 100 not only can do better economically, but they can do better evangelistically, because people go where people go. That's odd, but it's true. The more people you have, the easier it is to get more people. That's why mega churches keep growing bigger. That's why they keep opening campuses, because the more people you already have, the more people you can reach. All right, so the economics are going to make sense. Number two, the demographics are going to make sense. I think we're going to see this a lot. We're going to see older pastors who lead their congregation through a merger or an acquisition as a part of their succession plan. Succession planning is going to expand to include not only trying to find a person to follow me, but trying to find a congregation for us to merge with. That's how some smart pastors in the future are going to do it. A smart pastor who's retiring in his 60s and 70s is going to say to a young pastor who is building something and who's got something going, hey, I want us to sit down and talk, and I want to start building some relationship, because I want to fold our congregation into yours. You know, in the past, what would happen is when you see the young pastor over there building something strong, what we would do is we would go and pluck that young pastor from what he's building and bring him over into our stale, old, stiff-necked culture and make them go through 3 to 7 years of trying to get these people to stop fighting and to be willing to do something different and move forward. And then maybe they push it forward. And so we take them out of a good situation, out of good ground, pull them over here into our bad ground, and we choke the life out of them. I don't think that's going to be it in the future. I think in the future, wise leaders are going to say, instead of trying to pull them over here into this culture, where in essence, what I'm doing, especially if I'm leaving, is shifting all the power to the people who were here before me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my people, who are those who are willing to follow me, and I'm going to take them over there into their culture and teach them how to get with it. That's important. That is important. Because listen to me, I just feel like I need to say this because this is important. Pastor, when you retire, the people you held in check are going to act up on whoever comes next. In a lot of cases, not all, but in a lot of cases. Listen, man, I was working with the church and they had a very strong, domineering leader who he came in and said what it was, and everybody went with him because, he ain't play. Man, as soon as he passed away and they brought somebody else in there, every grievance that they had for the last 30 years, they was pouring on this new young pastor. And they wore him out because of the culture that the pastor before had built. All right. And so what's going to happen is pastors are going to get smart when they're retiring, is they're going to see that our church is not built for the next generation. Young people are not coming to this church. They're not coming because it's not built for them. It's not built for their families. But over there, they've got something that's built for the young people. We got the old people. Let's take our people over here with them and let's build in. All right. Another reason that we're going to see this happen is we're going to see strategic reasons. Is that if you can take two teams together, put them together and get everybody in their right spot, man, you can have a strong team. You can have a strong team, man. You can have a strong team. If you've ever seen two high schools in your city go through a merger where two high schools had to come together, they start producing state champions within a few years. Because all that talent that once was divided up is now consolidated. And once it's consolidated, it just makes more sense. And what ends up happening is you start seeing some immediate growth, right? So here's what I want you to think about. Are you going to be Blockbuster or Netflix? Are you going to be Blockbuster or Netflix? Y'all remember Blockbuster, where we would go on Friday nights, get that video that nobody rewound, and bring them videotapes home, them VCR tapes home, man, pop them in and watching. And I used to love getting their popcorn, man. They had that little popcorn you put in the microwave. It was so good, right? We remember Blockbuster. Well, what you may not know is that Netflix offered to sell themselves to Blockbuster before they blew up. And I think they offered themselves for something like 20 million or 10 million or something like that. Like, it was a small number compared to what they would become. And Blockbuster is like, nah, man, we're going to keep doing what we do, man. People like coming to the stores. They like coming to get these VCR tapes and all that kind of stuff like that. And then all of a sudden DVDs come out. And after DVDs, here come the Blu-rays. And so we rented DVDs, but then when the Blu-rays came out, that changed the game. And then you look up and all of a sudden the game changes again. Netflix starts out as this company that's mailing DVDs to people and sending them out so that they can go and get, so they can watch these things and so on and so on. And then one day they decide, what if we didn't have to send it? What if we could just send them online to a spot and they can go and watch whatever they want? And not only that, if we did it online, we could put as many movies as we wanted on there. So if Blockbuster can only hold 500 titles and we as Netflix can hold 50,000, it just makes sense. And you know the rest of the story. Now, Netflix is on the vast majorities of devices in our country, while Blockbuster is all but obsolete. Same thing. I give you another analogy. Taxis. All right. You may remember taking a taxi back in the day. All right. And I was a kid when taxis was around, but I do remember one particular experience where my mom was waiting on a taxi for something. I don't remember what it was, but I remember we were at my grandparents' house. And man, she called the taxi place 10 times. And they're like, oh, yeah, he coming. He going to be there in a little bit. But you had no way to contact the driver. You had no way of knowing where he was. And then when they showed up, like the quality of the cars and the people just didn't seem always great. And it was just a horrible experience. And in their arrogance, the taxi industry did not change or innovate because they assumed people don't have another option. And then here comes Uber. Uber says, you know, what if we had a transportation company without having to own cars? What if we don't even worry about the cars? Let's just set some standards. You know, car has to be this new. You got to pass an inspection, all that kind of stuff like that. All the drivers have to have a good record, but let them use their own cars. And let's just make money from the software. We don't need to own cars. We need to, let's do it a different way. And they completely ran the taxi industry out of there. Man, I go to the airport, you know, because I fly often. I go to the airport, man, and you see taxi drivers still lined up. I don't know how they still in business, but they just be lined up all across the place. Hey, man, you need a ride? I do need a ride, but not from you, my brother. I'm finna call this Uber. I already called my Uber from my phone, right? 10 minutes ago, and he pulling up. I'm finna get in this stranger's car, and I'm going with them, right? We can keep pretending like every church is going to magically bounce back. But if we do that, we're setting people up for heartbreak. We can keep acting like every church, oh man, it's going to be all right. We coming back. We can keep acting like every church is going to bounce back, but they're not. They are not. And what I'm asking you to do is to think about where you are in this equation. Are you a church that is in need of rescue, or are you a life jacket in a storm? Which side of the equation are you on? I want you to think about that. All right. So let's talk about this. All right. Last couple of pieces, and then we'll get ready to get out of here. All right. So let's talk about the benefits of being acquired. All right. Number one, you get access to more resources. Now you've got support for the staff. You've got financial stability. You've got some technology upgrades, right? You can do some different things. I've been part of a couple of acquisitions here recently. And right now, the church I'm a part of, we're in the midst of completely renovating a facility for a church that came to us through an acquisition. All the stuff that we have in our church, they're getting in their church. They're about to have it. So their technology is being upgraded. The facility has had repairs done. We're putting new life back into the building. All that we're even giving leadership. All those different things are happening because of that. Number two is people, man. Look, when you get around some more people, man, sometimes, you've been in your situation so long, you forget what another situation feels like, and you in here struggling with 15, 20 people doing everything by yourself, tired and frustrated. Man, you mess around and get into a church that's got a couple hundred people in it, that's got 200 people in it. It's a different energy when you come to worship and you see people excited to be there. When you come to church and you see people fired up to praise and worship, like that's a whole different thing. And you've got to understand that, man. There's new energy, there's new leadership, there's better ministries. There's so much more that you can do. Another one is facilities, man. You really get to maximize your facility. That's a big one. And then vision. When you really expand the vision, you get to make sure that you're making a difference. That's one of the things that happens sometimes as you go through different transitions, is that you begin to question whether or not you're making a difference. You can begin to question whether or not this is working. You can begin to question whether or not this is going somewhere. And what I want to say to you is a merger is not a funeral, it's a resurrection. It's a resurrection. Oh my goodness. Come on. Somebody give me some fire emojis in the chat. A merger is not a funeral. It's a resurrection. It's a resurrection. And that's how you've got to see it as you begin to move into it. All right. Now, let's talk about this. There are some dangers when it comes to mergers. And so if you're thinking about this, there's a couple of things that I want to make you aware of, and I want you to think about this. All right. There are some leadership issues, some identity concerns, and then some practical problems. Let's talk about it. So let's talk about the leadership issues. Number one is ego clashes. Ego. If ego gets in the way, it can become a problem. Ego sometimes keeps us from recognizing what we should see in other people. Right. And so you've got to be careful. You've got to watch the ego, because it's true, man. Not every merger is God ordained. Like, as much as we're talking about this from a practical standpoint, you still have to go and get on your face before the Lord and ask him what he wants you to do and where he wants you to go and how he wants you to do it. Number two is power struggles over leadership. One of the things that, especially in mergers, is who's going to be the lead guy? Who's going to be the lead guy? And then how do you decide? Is it the best preacher or is it the best leader? Is there a difference? Right. And for this reason, if you're going through a merger, I encourage you not to do it by yourself. Get a third party, a consultant, or somebody to come in and help you walk through it so that you won't have to do it by yourself. Because there are some things that you're going to ignore, especially if your situation is desperate enough. You'll ignore some of the things that you need to be paying attention to. So don't try to do it by yourself. Number two, identity concerns are something you got to watch out for. They're dangerous. A loss of history, right? How do you navigate that? If we're merging, are we creating a brand new church? And if we're creating a brand new church, are we going to tell the history of the two previous churches? Or are we just going to let it fade away? Are we going to say, Next Level Church was built when Gotham City Baptist Church and Atlantis Pentecostal Church decided to join forces January 1st, 2035. These two individual churches came together for the sake of something bigger. You can learn about the individual church histories here. Right? What are you going to do that? How are you going to do that? Number two is another thing within that is members feeling lost. It's really easy for people to get lost in a transition like this. And so you have to make sure that communication is clear, that you communicate really well, that you walk through things really well, that you really detail things out so that people can take those next steps. All right. And then the practical problems are this. Sometimes the community can really struggle. Now this is not the case with most, because by the time you come to a point where you need to do it, where you're thinking about a merger, there's some disconnection with the community. But a bigger one is when the cultures don't match. If you've got one church that has a culture of transparency and another church that has a culture of secrecy, Those two things, they may not match. If you've got one church that has a culture of care and providing pastoral care for people, and you've got another church that has a culture of just preaching and that's it. Unless you really walk through that and what that looks like, it could be a tough thing. All right. So let me give you this. All right. Last piece. How do you do this? Right. If you're thinking about a merger and you're thinking about walking through it, how do you do it? Let's dive into it. All right. So here are some practical steps, right? For my pastors, if you are a pastor and you're thinking about a merger, I want you to start relationships before you're desperate. Don't wait until your situation is so bad that you just gotta go. Start relationships now. Start talking with some other leaders who you think might be great candidates for mergers. Go ahead and start that process now. Don't wait to the last minute. Go ahead and start the conversation. If you are a part of a board, or if you have a board or a team of elders or a team of deacons that serve as a leadership structure, one of the things that you can do to prepare is start thinking about your merger policies. What are the non-negotiables? What are the things you're willing to sacrifice and let go of for the greater good? What are the things that would be really challenging you to let go of? And I challenge you to be very, open-handed with this if you believe God is leading you into it, but start talking about it now. Start walking through those policies. It'll be really hard to have a merger conversation if you don't have the hard conversations until you get to the finish line. Have the hard conversations before you even start the race. Have them right now. It's like premarital counseling. Premarital counseling helps you address the hard stuff that you know is going to come up later. That's what a wise premarital counselor does. They help you address the difficult things that they know is coming up later. And so you want to do the same thing. All right. So start thinking about that. Number 3 is start doing a financial checkup. You got to be honest about your budget. Is your budget sustainable where it is? Here's what you can't do. Is you cannot walk into a merger conversation presenting yourself as stronger than you really are. Don't come in here talking about, well, man, we doing all right. Stuff is, we up and down like everybody, but we all right. No, fam, you not all right. If you paying the bills out of your pocket, you not all right. Because now when you bring this other group in, and now you don't have to pay those bills out of the pocket, you got less than what you represented. And so do a financial checkup. Even if you're thinking about, do we need to consider this? Do a financial checkup. How much longer can you go at the current rate? I want you to think about that. All right, number 4, this is very important. You have got to have a clear vision. Wherever you're headed, the vision needs to be clear. You got to have them hard conversations. This is not a situation where you say, look, let's just do it and we'll figure it out later. The devil is a liar. It will tear things up later. You need to have those hard conversations. What is the vision for what we're building? Who is the visionary? Who reports to who? Because if we're going to do a merger and I become the senior pastor and you become the assistant pastor, if people all of a sudden, your people still think they can come to you for everything without going through whatever structures we set up, it's going to be a problem. And then here's the last thing I want to challenge you to do is get legal help. Don't try to do this on your own. You need to understand what your responsibilities are with the properties and deeds and even the denominational rules. If your denomination helped you buy a church, you can't sell it by yourself. You need to bring them back involved to the conversation, right? Because they may have some rules and regulations for what they want to do. If you're merging and you're no longer keeping the building, give the people who bought it for you or helped you buy it, give them the first option to actually go in and reclaim the property. They may have other churches that want to do it. But one of the most spiritual things that you can do is start talking about succession and sustainability right now. Right now, you got to start talking about it. Right now, you got to start talking about it. You cannot wait to the end. All right. Let me give you this final charge. All right. And I'm going to close out. Here's the final charge is I believe that God is orchestrating mergers. I believe he's pulling this together for his own divine purposes, right? And he's not doing it to kill us, but to keep us alive. He's doing it to keep us alive. And he's bringing together all these giftings and all these resources and all these leaders and all these callings and all these purposes. He's bringing all these things together so that you can do together what you could never do alone. And here's the reality for many of you who are listening to me right now. Either we will merge willingly for the sake of the kingdom, or our circumstances will force us to die. And here's a reality: merge or die. I know this didn't apply to everybody, but I know to some of us and to some of you, it does apply. You don't have to die when you can go through a resurrection. All right. So I'm going to make this final call for those of you who need some support and who need some help. We've got 2 ways that we work with churches. And I'm saying that right now, but these programs are getting ready to change. All right. I have been working, and I am, as a matter of fact, right now in the midst of some time of prayer and really locking in to hear from the Holy Spirit about just how we can restructure some things. Because what I'm realizing is that I have got to make sure that I begin to preserve myself for the people that God has called me to serve, the people who are serious about attaching and connecting with me and with our company around what God has called us to build, my team and I. And so I've got to really focus in. And so as a result, I'm getting ready to change how we deliver our programs. And so the programs as we currently offer them is about to change. Things are about to change. Things are really about to simplify. And quite honestly, I am going to give less of myself away. And I'm really going to preserve that for people that I know are deeply committed to the process of where God has called us to go. Over these last few years, we've learned so much from working with churches and working with pastors, and we've seen so many testimonies and so many amazing stories of people who have been transformed and blessed, and their churches have been changed and all those kinds of things. And so right now, it's one of your final opportunities. If you want to get some help with trying to pull your church into organization and move it towards health, you can go to getchurchsystems.com, and you can learn all the details about who we are and what we do, and you can join one of our programs. I think our current programs probably are available for another week at best, maybe 2 weeks, because by then we will have completely remodeled and overhauled our website to reflect the new direction that we're getting ready to go in. But if you want some help, I want you to click it. All right. Now, if you haven't already, do me a favor, click subscribe if you're on YouTube, click like and share if you're on Facebook or LinkedIn or wherever you are. Next week, I want to encourage you, don't miss. We're going to be talking about niche churches, the churches that will meet in third spaces. We're going to see churches popping up in coffee shops and bars and community centers. It's going to be frontline ministry in a new way. And I'm going to break it down for you next week and show you what it looks like, and maybe even help you figure out what third space you should consider going into. All right. And as we get ready to close out, I want to say a word of prayer over you, to pray for you as we get ready to just continue to move forward into what God is doing. Thank you all so much for your support. It has just meant the world to us to see just the impact that we've been able to have on so many of you. And so I'm just praying that the Lord would just continue to take us to higher heights and deeper depths. All right. Father, in the name of Jesus, I thank you for every leader underneath the sound of my voice. God, you know where every one of us are. You know what we're going through and what we're dealing with. There are some churches, Father, some leaders that maybe you're moving on their hearts right now to go through a merger or an acquisition. And Father, I just pray that you would speak to them with clarity. Give them a clear vision of who you are and what you want to do in and through them. God, I believe that you are taking us through this not to kill the church, but to keep it alive. So, Father, help us to get in line with your will and to go where you want us to go and do what you called us to do. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Listen, I love you. I appreciate you. I want to encourage you. Make sure you go over to getchurchsystems.com. You can find some more support and some more opportunity to learn about who we are and what we do. Listen, I love you. God bless, and I will look forward to talking to you soon. Peace.